Okay, welcome everybody. This is an important class. I sent you all an email heads up that today at the start of this class, what first task is going to be describing, I actually already have, it's on your syllabus, but I am here to, of course, expound on, make sure you're all clear on the procedure for the second midterm. It's very simple. It's nowhere near as complicated as the first midterm was, but we'll get to that in a couple minutes. Let's see, I think I've let everyone who's waiting. Yeah, so here we go. First of all, I recorded the lecture for Monday, and you know what? Kudos. I'm pleasantly surprised, I must be honest, that I didn't get 3 or 4 people saying, where's, the Zoom invitation? Because I'd already explained that in the previous 2 lectures. So apparently everybody, apparently everybody understood that I was not going to give it live in real time, but I posted it by Thursday. Now, if you didn't see that, you want to watch that. Hi, how you doing? You want to watch that. It's on YouTube, like all my other lectures, and it's in the order it should be, which follows the Romanticism 2 lectures that I already had posted, right? Because in that one, I give the definitions. This is really important of Romanticism. Sorry, whoops, I already did that. I mean, of realism and Impressionism. I'm going to say for sure one of those 2 definitions will appear on the final, not on the second midterm. The final is the same format as the first midterm. We'll get to how the second midterm is going to be given in just a minute, but I just want to make sure everybody knows it's really important that you watch the video of, which I recorded last week. And so it would be in order. It would say week 12, realism and Impressionism. We're going to complete or finish up with Impressionism today. We have quite a few slides that are important to get to, but I don't want to rush through the first thing we're here for, which is, let's see, is that, yeah, good timing. We just are starting with, I'm going to do the mute all again because we had a couple of people just join us. Okay, I'm just saying that now is the time for me to go over with all of you what is already, take a look now, everyone, please, because I already did this, made sure that I put it detailed at the bottom of the page you should have in front of you anyway. This page, of course, above that is what we're covering week 12 now. But you see for next week, which is going to be on the 9th, so you have a week from today to prepare, will be your second midterm. So I'll read it first and then I'll expound on that and make sure it's very clear. But of course, I'll also take any questions that you may have. And then we'll get started with completing or finishing up with Impressionism, because there's a lot of interesting Impressionist slides for us to look at today. But first, you should just read along with me if you haven't already done this. At the bottom of where it's week 13, November 9th, second midterm is an in-class essay format, much simpler, much easier than the 3-part, 3 sections, right, of the first midterm. This was suggested by both one of my former readers and several former students, plus other teachers I've talked to who give this kind of essay format test in class. I had them when I was a student at Berkeley a long time ago, and I know others of you have had this kind of option where here's what will happen. Tomorrow, that I did not write down here, but tomorrow before 6 p.m., that's Thursday the 3rd, there's your alliteration, Thursday the 3rd of November, you will get a short list of 4. There we go, 4 of the slides we've covered since the midterm, right? In the last few weeks, 4, there'll be a short list. Out of those, all of them you should have the notes for because we covered them in class. And of course, all those lectures are on YouTube. So all you need to do really to prepare is gather your notes for all 4 of those slides. Then on the 9th, and it says right here, please log in by 3:10. I know sometimes people log in later, but most of you don't do that. So by 3:15, you all want to be logged in. So you'll see for 1 whole hour, one only of those 4 slides will be posted for the entire hour. So you'll have plenty of time to do what? To analyze the same way you did on your papers. Everybody hear that? In other words, the grading system will be the same, except one big difference. You get a break. No in-text citation or bibliography. Of course, it's an in-class test. You don't have to cite your sources. You just take the notes from the class lecture that was about that slide. You already should have all those notes. and put them, next to your laptop or whatever you're using to write your answer. Now, this is a word to the wise, though, because I know some people will not, take the time they need to. I can tell you right now, with some papers from the first research paper, the ones that didn't get an A or B were ones that did not take enough time to analyze the formal elements. Usually those papers would be at least okay, if not really well done on the meaning, spending enough time and a length of number of lines, right? I'm going to summarize that in a minute. How long is the minimum for this? It's slightly shorter than your papers. But the point is, if you don't take the time, in other words, if you log out in half an hour, you're not going to get a good grade. I guarantee it on this second midterm. And it's getting late in the semester. There's only one other grade coming up, and it's the final. So you don't want to do that. You want to sit there and take your time to do the same. It'll be all written out. You're going to get a PDF tomorrow. You're going to get a PDF by 6 p.m. of two things: the test sheet itself, which has all these same instructions exactly printed all out for you, just like I did with the papers, the first research papers. That, and you need a cover sheet because we have to grade it, me or the readers. So there'll be two. You did this before. You guys did a great job. I mean, once in a while, some, and I've had that issue too, where you can't always combine the cover sheet with the actual test sheets. Try to do that, though. Most of you were able to, and that makes it much quicker and easier and more efficient for us to give you your grade, your fair grade. So put them into one. This will all be written out for you. It'll be in the email I'll send you tomorrow, and I'll say it live when we're actually starting the test. So there should be no reason why there's any uncertainty. It's very similar to what you did with your first paper. The difference is there's no bibliography, no in-text citations, because it's an in-class, live, real-time, 1 hour essay exam. But you guys have until midnight to turn it in. I'm giving you that extra time. I know some people need to go back. They might want to change their answers, or maybe you hand printed them and decided to redo them in text, typed into, a digital format. That's your decision. Either way, if you write them by hand, remember, you need to print neatly in black ink. All of those instructions will be sent to you again tomorrow, but I'm give them to you right now. It's pretty straightforward. It's probably the easiest way to take a midterm, but you'll have to just use your notes from that particular slide that you took or got. If you missed the class, of course, they're on YouTube. So you'll be able to, in other words, you need to do a little bit more studying of those 4 slides specifically, because you'll be asked to write 3 to 4 pages. That's very reasonable in an hour. Roughly 1.5 to 2 pages each on the formal analysis, and at least that much on the meaning, if you want an A or even a B. And what does that mean? Again, remember on your papers, some people miss points by only giving me 1 example or 2 of modeling or simulated texture. I'm going to pick a slide where the elements will all be pretty clear. Whichever one of the 4 in that list you'll get tomorrow is the actual slide you're going to have to write on. Won't be ambiguous. It's not going to be abstract. I mean, we haven't covered abstract art. So you'll be able to see elements, all the elements in it. So you need to take your time. My suggestion is you take a lot longer, or not longer, but somewhat longer on the formal analysis while the slide's on the screen. I would do that first. In any case, the test sheet is organized just so clearly that it'll say, first do this, or do whichever of the 2 you want to do first. The meaning, keep them separate and label them. It says all of that right on the test sheet that you'll get as a PDF tomorrow, along with the cover sheet. For the cover sheet, you just need, of course, to have that in the same file, PDF file, of course, to submit by midnight on November 9th. So you have almost a whole week to prepare. It's pretty straightforward. I took tests like this a lot at UC Berkeley in both history and art and psychology, where you write an essay in essence, but you don't just rush through it. You take your time, look at your notes, say, okay, did I cover 3 or more examples of each of these elements? If you didn't, you're not going to get as good a grade. So expect to spend that hour roughly of actually writing about it. And then you got till midnight to decide how to submit that to me by email, of course, as a PDF. Okay, that's pretty much the whole thing. Of course, what would you need? My advice, again, just a suggestion, next to your laptop or whatever device you're using to look at these lectures, you should have 2 black ink pens, because one might leak or run out of ink. It's unlikely, but just so you got yourself covered, I would have 2 black ink pens and extra paper, blank paper, because some of you will choose, like you did on your first midterm, to actually hand print all your answers or the essay on that second midterm. That's perfectly acceptable. Remember, then you convert it with screenshots of each page into a PDF, just like many of you did, and submit it to me by midnight. Yeah, you can type it. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, I don't know if you joined late. Yeah, in fact, that's actually probably safer, because usually people can read, me or any reader could read typed answers, but I'm giving you the option of hand printed. Remember, it needs to be printed, not cursive. You know, I should start asking this in my live classes. How many people still get taught how to do cursive? I've heard they don't even teach it anymore in public schools. So I think my daughter said that. She said, well, we talked about cursive in 3rd grade, and then we never mentioned it again. Don't write cursive, don't write longhand, write print neatly, which most of you did choose if you want to do it that way. Or yes, of course, you can type it in. Okay, it looks like we have pretty near full attendance compared to what we had before for the review for the first midterm. See, the good news is you don't have to worry about in-text citations or bibliography. So my expectation is, if you didn't do as well as you hoped, like you didn't get even a B, like an A or a B on the first midterm, you have a much better chance of getting a good grade, hopefully an A on this midterm, because there are no requirements for bibliography or in-text citations. But if you, like I said, if you don't even spend, 45 minutes, let's say, on the entire essay and check your writing before you turn it in, and then decide if you want, you have till midnight to make corrections or changes. If you spend like less than 45 minutes, certainly half hour or less, I can tell you, you're not going to get a good grade, because we do want you to take the time to analyze each of the 10 elements in detail, and then come up with at least 2, like you did on your papers, types of meaning. One is always required, the illustration. What's the story or the message that that work of art is trying to say? And then something else, whether it's about the life of the author or the style of that work of art, just like you did on your papers. In other words, it's very much the same thing as having a paper done in class, except no bibliography, no footnotes or endnotes or in-text citations. Okay, I think I've covered it all. We kind of want to get going, but is any burning, urgent questions anybody has of what I just said? You'll see this will be, I think, the easiest type of format of a midterm. At least in any class I've ever taught or taken. But you do have to, get into the details and make it a decent attempt to answer all, or not answer, analyze all 10 elements.
Excuse me.
Sure, go ahead.
So what you're saying is you're going to show a slide on the screen.
Right, it'll stay on the screen for a whole hour.
Then you want us to analyze it?
Yes, exactly like you did on your papers.
Okay,
without the bibliography or footnotes. Exactly.
Okay. In an essay form.
That's it. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, I just want to be clear.
Sure. Yeah, that's what we're here for. Okay, so I think people get the idea. It's actually going to be a less stressful test, because you already have the notes, and there'll only be 4 slides, not a list of 30 that you have to study from. Just the 4 I give you as possible choices, one of which will be the actual slide you're testing on. I think it's pretty straightforward. I wanted to do this format earlier, but I didn't want to have 3 tests. Well, now we're required to give 3 exams in every art history class at this JC. It's a new department guidelines. So I figured this is an easier way, less painful, more painless. And I think you'll find it, as long as you just have the notes of all 4 slides that were on the list, you will get that list tomorrow afternoon next to your laptop. Then you just pull out that set of notes from the one slide that will be on the screen, and you'll have a whole hour to do that. Some of you will finish before an hour, but if I were you, I would take the extra time, since we're giving you till midnight, to double check after I log off, that you covered everything.
And it's also 3 pages.
Yeah, minimum of 3. Most people will take closer to 4, say between 3 and 4. Like, in other words, on each half, roughly 1.5 to 2 pages would be good. So it's slightly less length minimum requirement than the papers were. So I'm giving you a break on that too. Right.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Let's get started with some fascinating works of art that I think many of you will agree. Let's see, is everyone here? Yeah. All right, let's do the screen share. Some of you may already know, if you've ever, not ever, if you were able to get to the exhibit at the Legion of Honor of Impressionism that was done, oh gosh, I can't remember when, about 4 years ago. This slide was there along with others. So here's our first must know, okay, now for today. It could be one of the 4 slides that I put on that short list for you to study for the second midterm. Take good notes, in other words, as always. Here we go. Today's first must know, the artist is Degas, D-E-G-A-S. The title, The Dance Class. Those words everyone knows how to spell. The Dance Class, 1875. So what are we looking at here? Well, let's start with who was Degas. Degas was one of the original Impressionists. When I say that, I mean he joined the movement of Impressionism, exhibited with all the other Impressionists from the beginning of that movement. So just say it that way. He was one of the 2 things. First Impressionist, or you could say first painters to join the Impressionist movement, A, and B, he was one of the most successful. He was very popular during his career. His paintings, and he also was sculptor, but you could just say paintings, that's what we're going to focus on, were definitely very popular with the public. Why? Here are the main facts about, besides what I just told you about him, and then we'll talk about what this scene is showing us. Okay, again, about Degas. Well, let's say one thing is he had, remember the phrase I used before? I'm going to keep using it throughout the rest of this course. Signature motifs. That means techniques that an artist uses to, distinguish their work, to show as their kind of painting in this case. So what are his or Degas' signature motifs? First, we have an oblique angle. Oblique, O-B-L-E-Q-U-E, remember, oblique means an odd or very sharp diagonal line. Well, look at this. This room is clearly arranged in an oblique angle in the view of the paint, not the room itself, obviously, but the view we have of the room is at an oblique angle. That is in almost every large setting, group setting of any Degas painting. He liked doing that. Where did he get that idea? From Japanese prints. That's part of the meaning. He was very directly influenced, and he said so, by traditional Japanese prints. They've been doing that for centuries. We talked about that, remember, when we covered Japanese art. So Degas was one of the first Western artists to be influenced by Japanese prints, and that would be mostly in the use of the oblique angle. You see it here. Obviously, this whole thing is at a sharp diagonal, the way the room is arranged in this view. The second signature motif of Degas is that he mixed realism with Impressionism in almost every painting. He wasn't a strict Impressionist, even though he joined the movement. He was, exhibiting with them and all. He liked mixing up in the same, within each painting, some parts of them would be realistic. Well, what's realistic here? Well, the back here and arms, right, roughly of the, visible part of the upper body of this dancer. And this one here too, her hand and her sash. And then the instructor is pretty close. It's on the cusp, but he's more sharp and detailed in both the modeling and simulated texture on his clothing and his hair, right? The instructor of this dance class. So again, I'll say that one more time. The second of all of the signature motifs of Degas was a use of both realism, areas of both realism and Impressionism within the same painting. He did that almost in all his larger paintings, which weren't just portraits. And then the third thing is he loved his themes as a signature motif were mostly performing artists. There were exceptions, of course, and that includes this one, of course. It's his most famous painting, this one, or one of it. It's hard to say the most. It's very, very well known during his lifetime. So this is one of many views he painted of different dance classes in Paris. He lived in Paris. And it's a famous instructor, an actual person. It's a portrait of a man who was once a dancer himself. Obviously, he's now a little too old for that. So he is teaching young girls how to do classical or ballet style dancing. That's what this is. It's a room full of young students being taught by a master, a retired, star dancer. And you don't need to know his name. I don't even know if it's in the text, but the point is to just say he once was a famous dancer and now he's retired. So he, of course, had given Degas permission to sketch this class during one of his lessons. And then Degas went back and painted this scene. So everyone in this is actually a real person, but most important is the instructor right in the middle, leaning on his stick or walking stick, I guess, not really a cane, telling them what they're doing right or wrong. Okay, so that's the whole meaning. And don't forget that this is a good example of mostly Impressionism. So now we'll do the formal elements, but with some realistic detail. So let's do the simulated texture first. I've already mentioned it, but I'll repeat this. Under simulated texture on your formal analysis notes for this slide, and if it happens to be the one that's on the second midterm you'd want to mention, there are mixed areas in this same view of realism and Impressionism. For example, realistic detail is shown on the skin of the closest dancer, on her arms, right, on the sash, and at least one hand of the other dancer next to her, and on the clothing and hair. There you go. You've got what, 4 or 5 examples of realism. Everywhere else it's impressionistic. On their tutus, right? You can say dresses if you want, but the right word is, some of you know, tutu is the name of that kind of attire that a ballet dancer would wear. So their dresses or skirts, actually you can say skirts or tutus, are impressionistic. All of them, even the one that's closest to us. Oh, I forgot, the realism also extends to her legs, maybe not to the dog. Okay, and then we have modeling. It's very strong and realistic on the instructor's clothing and on the backs, right, the skin and hair of these 2 closest dancers. It's not, it's the opposite though, is the soft and soft or diffused. Either word will do. Remember, by now you should already know how to use these terms. Soft or diffuse modeling and simulated texture are found. Remember, you'd want to write these as separate items. You'll have that list in front of you on the cover sheet for the second midterm. So when it comes to simulated texture, it's implied, it's soft and diffused and not realistic. And any of the other dancers past these 2, on the wall, the mirror, it's soft and diffused almost everywhere except on him and their 2, the upper bodies. So the same thing is true on the modeling, soft and diffused modeling, around him, on the wall, the ceiling, the floor, these columns, everywhere except the 2 areas of realism. Now, line here is used on the floorboards. That's a bit unusual, but it's not sharp. It's also soft, isn't it? In fact, even disappears. So again, these are the kind of things you'll be doing on your second midterm, and many of you or most of you already did on your first research papers. Is there a line as outline? I'd say yes, definitely on the backs of these 2 dancers, especially the closest one to around her arms. Absolutely, her neck. Yeah, that's strong, thin outline. But there is no line anywhere else. It's just, again, colors and space, or shapes rather, I meant to say shapes, of these figures, of their dresses or tutus, of the wall, columns on the wall. Those don't have outline, thin or bold. Okay, then what about dynamic? Well, it's entirely dynamic in one way, because the whole scene is at a diagonal. But you want to be more specific. Remember, one example of any element won't get you a very good grade. So you're going to say it's dynamic on the dresses of the girls and their legs, right? And the diagonal of the room and the floorboards. There you go. You've got your 4 examples of where it's dynamic. Is it stable anywhere? Well, yes. The instructor, clearly standing upright, stable, as is the mirror, even though it's at a diagonal because of the angle of the painting. Obviously, the outer edges are straight lines. The mirror and these columns were straight lines, straight, upright, and not diagonal. Within the mirror itself is stable, obviously. So there you go. And then maybe you could say the legs of the closest dancer, standing pretty much straight upright. These other dancers' legs are dynamic, of course. You guys can do most of this, I think, by now, but I'll do that for just on the possibility that one of the slides from today could end up being the one on the second midterm. Okay, what else? For space, we have diminishing size, overlapping, foreshortening all the walls of the floorboards and so forth. And we do not have atmospheric perspective because it's an indoor scene, but there is a vanishing point. It would be beyond this wall. So it does have scientific perspective. Rhythm is so obvious. I mean, it doesn't even need to be explained. Obviously, the whole room is full of repeated heads, arms, hands, legs, floorboards, lots of rhythm. The largest mass, it's probably the floor. I would call it the floor. And then the wall where the mirror is, and then the closest dancer. And then it's a close call between her, perhaps it's a friend of hers anyway, the dancer next to her, or the instructor would be the fourth largest mass. It's roughly balanced. It depends on how you see it. If you see the floor as a solid mass, if you see it as empty, though, you might think of it as unbalanced toward the left and the top. But I think the dancers are arranged pretty much along the middle line here. And to me, this dancer balances roughly with the mirror, the area of the wall where the mirror is. But I know many people would look at it and say, no, it's really kind of unbalanced or weighted more toward the left. And perhaps if you drew the line here toward the top. Okay, and for proportion or scale, there's no altered. See, on that one, you don't have to give examples unless there is altered scale of proportion visible. There is none here. So on that of the 10 elements, you wouldn't need to spend very long on this. There's no altered or distorted proportion or scale. Okay, let's move on to another one. This ought to get some people's interest. I'll bet a few of you know what the title of this is talking about, of this next must know. It's again by Degas, D-E-G-A-S, of course. The Glass of Absinthe, A-B-S-I-N-T-H-E, A-B-S-I-N-T-H-E, one word, absinthe, 1875. Does anybody here know what absinthe is?
It's a spirit.
Yes, right. And I bet you know what does it either taste or smell like. I've only tried it once or twice in Paris bars. You can get it here in the US now. It didn't used to be available.
I don't know. I've never drank it.
Oh, okay. But you're right. It's a very powerful alcohol, which has a licorice-like taste, and it's green. It used to be nicknamed the Green Goblin, which was a way of saying that it was dangerous. It was, because back in the 1800s, when this scene was painted, Van Gogh drank it. Some people think that gave him hallucinations. It had a powerful component of wormwood. You don't have to know. You can just say it had chemicals in it that sometimes cause hallucinations. Plus, it was much stronger. Those are the two facts you should know about what absinthe was. It was a very popular drink throughout Europe and North America. Then it was outlawed. It was outlawed in the early 1800s, but that's long after this painting. And now it's legal again, but I'm sure it's controlled so it doesn't have the hallucinatory effect. Anyway, so Van Gogh drank it. Lots of other painters and artists did, writers. But that's not who these two are. This is a couple this is the meaning now, in a bar, okay, in Paris. No question, we actually know who they were. And there's two theories about either they were a real couple that Degas just wanted to capture their relationship, and let's see if we can tell what kind of relationship it was by looking at their faces and their body language. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, who they were was just some, working class. They were clearly working class couple in a bar in Paris. And the two theories are either they were just acquaintances or, known to Degas and agreed to pose for him. And the other theory is that he just saw them in a bar and decided to capture a moment of reality. So let's now talk about the main part of the meaning. Well, here's the absinthe. You see, sorry, go ahead.
I was told that they were in a bar or restaurant trying to keep warm from the winter.
Oh, I've never heard that. Yeah.
That's what I was told.
It's possible, but there's much more.
They were drinking to keep warm.
Well, maybe, but I've done a lot of reading on this. You know why? Because I decided when I first started teaching this class, it's not in every textbook. I don't even know since Stockstead, but it's fascinating because there's something going on. Let's take a close look. Look at her face.
Oh, she looks beat up.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, that might be literally true. Anybody at all want to say, what do you think that the artist here, Degas, is trying to say about this relationship? Look at him.
Not good.
No, it's dysfunctional, or you can say, a very abusive, probably. So let's see, Tanya, you were the one that said, right? Could be she's been abused, but in any case, she's been emotionally neglected. He's looking, guess what he's looking at? Can you guess? He's in
Another woman.
yeah, another woman walking in, clearly. She is depressed. This is what you should be writing now.
Therapy.
Clearly depressed, and disillusioned is a good word, or dejected, any of the D words. Disgusted, disillusioned, dejected, all of the above. Depressed. No question she's depressed. We're getting too much background noise here, so I'm going to see if I can. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, all right. So this couple is not a happy couple, mostly because he ignores or even emotionally, we don't know if he physically abused her, but clearly emotionally he abused her trust. And she seems like she's feeling hopeless too. Look at her slumped shoulders. In other words, like, what can I do? She can't afford to go find a place of her own, perhaps. So she feels trapped. That's another strong hint that the artist is trying to convey here. So whether this was a couple posing to create that impression or a real couple that had that kind of relationship, either way, that's the message that almost every historian has assigned to this. Why would Degas paint this? This is one of his few paintings which was not about performing artists. There's no performance here, at least not, that's obvious. You see, the bottle's empty. She's been drinking for a while, and that's all she can do. It's called self-medicating. You know that phrase? You could put it in your notes in case this might be on the short list of slides that you'll need to study. If it was to be on that list, you'd want to make sure you mention that absinthe, of course, being as a powerful an alcoholic drink as it was a kind of escape for someone, say, in a relationship like this. The phrase, you can be more alone in some relationships than by yourself. I don't know if you've heard that phrase, but some of you may know from experience, depending on how you're treated by the other person. Well, obviously, she's not been treated well by this turkey over here, who really couldn't care less about her. Probably just for him, it's an arrangement of convenience. For her, it's very depressing, this whole relationship. Now, what else is part of the meaning is his techniques. Now, this does have one of his signature motifs is not here. It is not a scene of performing artists of any kind, dancers, musicians, nothing like that. But it has the oblique angle. Here we go again. See, the very Japanese influence that he was known for. And then the realism shows it just minimal detail here. I would say on her face, that's a pretty realistic, it's not really impressionistic, her hair and her face. He wants you to focus, to emphasize. That's why, he emphasized her face as the one area of more realistic than impressionistic detail, because he wants us to notice how sad she is, how depressed. And some would say that the bottle here, because there is outline around it, is somewhere in between, a little bit more realistic than impressionist. Everything else, though, is impressionistic around them. Soft modeling and similar texture on everything else, even the rest of her body, her bonnet or wherever that is, all of her so-called partner, boyfriend, whatever he is, next to her, and of course the tabletops and the wall behind them, it's all soft and diffused modeling and texture. Is there line here? I would say yes on her upper body. Around her arms, shoulders, and it's a little bit around her eyes and her mouth. So there is some on her upper body. Him, you notice, though, not really. So there's very minimal outline, except on the edges of the two tables, the closest tables. Well, actually, all three of them. But mostly in the background around them, and the rest of her body, and definitely his, there is no line, as outlined. The largest mass, it's her by at least a notch. The tabletops are pretty large, but she's the largest object. We can see all of her body, and then him, and then I guess the table with the empty bottle. The rhythm is obvious. The human body parts. Welcome. We're on the second must-know slide now from today's list, finishing up with Impressionism. So anyway, so she's pretty much the obvious source of, well, rhythm is everywhere. Obviously the tabletops, all three of them are the same shape. And then we have the human body parts, of course, arms, hands, legs, and heads. Lots of rhythm. Is it stable or dynamic? Well, by definition, when you have an oblique angle, the diagonal angle, the overall feeling of it is dynamic. However, she's sitting, even though she's slumped a bit on her shoulders, she's still mostly sitting upright. And the tables, the edges of the tables, would be considered stable. The bottle and the glass from which she's drinking and that's very impressionistic, of course. Those are mostly stable, but overall, the rest of it is dynamic because of the oblique angle. Let's see, for space, yeah, overlapping, of course, foreshortening on the tabletops, right? Diminishing size, yeah, I'd say so. He's slightly smaller than her, though he's probably taller if he stood up. And the glass here, this bottle's smaller. Yeah, definitely diminishing size. I don't know if it has scientific perspective. That I would leave if it's on the second midterm. I'm not saying it will be, but if that's a slide, you could say it appears there could be a vanishing point behind the wall, but there's no atmospheric perspective.
Excuse
Okay.
me,
Yes, go ahead.
the absinthe has a flavor of licorice.
Yes, it does. It smells
Well,
like
what's
licorice.
what's
Yeah.
the difference between that and ouzo? They both.
Good question. You'd have to ask someone. See, I don't know if absinthe is a French invention, but that's where I saw it. the
Ouzo
first
can
time I
be
was in-
very strong too.
Ouzo's Greek, right? So I would ask a person from Greek culture. I don't know.
Huh.
They
Bet
they
you
are
Google will
similar.
know.
It's true, they are similar, but I think absinthe has a little bit more of a minty. At least when
Stronger.
I tried it, it's more like a minty, like a licorice candy or something, which is very, well, you don't need to write this, a very kind of addictive thing, because if you like licorice, most people do, the
Ew.
flavor, you're going to want to drink more than you would have, say, some other hard alcohol. Yeah, it's like 40 proof or
Because
something.
ouzo, you can dilute it
Yeah, that's
and
true.
it'll turn
Right.
that color.
Right. Yeah, and it won't be green. Yeah. Okay, so I think we've covered all the main elements here. Modeling, texture. Oh yeah, there's no distorted proportions here or scale between these. Are all realistic sizes of all the two humans and the objects around them. Okay, and balance. Oh yeah, I forgot balance. I would say yes, she's right in the middle. You've got these two tables roughly equaling each other, not quite, but almost. And then the wall here behind them is roughly equal to the floor below. So it's roughly balanced. Okay, let's move on. Now we get to an artist who is part of the importance of the obvious fact that women are, if it isn't obvious by now, I've said this several times in previous lectures, women artists who were quite successful in their time during their lifetimes, all the way from the Renaissance up until, well, really in the late 20th century, finally, were getting forgotten. Julia Morgan, for example, the architect. I mean, it took 50 plus years for the American Institute of Architects after she died to give her a gold medal. She should have had it long before she died. She was one of the best and most prolific, the most prolific architect, the most productive of any American, even outdid Frank Lloyd Wright. And yet she wasn't recognized after she died for decades, except by a few people like myself and a couple other people who chose to write books about her. Anyway, the point is this woman was not like in that category. She was one of those very few, and it's Cassatt. The title of the next must know. This isn't the must know, obviously, you can tell by the title, but I'll give you the title so you have it written down. Cassatt, the artist's last name, first name was Mary. Cassatt is Cassatt, Cassatt, the Bath, 1891. That will be this one, which is one of the most famous paintings in the history of Western art. Well, we're going to work up to it. So who was Mary Cassatt? You can just say Cassatt. Cassatt was the first famous American woman painter, period. There's no debating that. No, alternative theories. No, there's no question. Again, I'll say that. Mary Cassatt was the first famous American woman painter. She had to move to France to become famous and never returned to the United States because she could not make a living as a woman painter in America, even though she was extremely talented. So she moved to Paris, and guess who became her lifelong friend to help promote her work both in Europe and North America? Degas. They were very good friends. That's an important detail. You could mention it if either of those last two slides is the one on the second midterm, or they might appear either one of those, remember, on the final exam, which will be just like the first exam, the first midterm, which is that both Degas and Cassatt were impressionists who mixed areas of realism and impressionism in the same painting. So they had things in signature motifs in common. That's one of them. This is all part of the meaning of this painting. What is the realism? Well, look right here, her glove and the teacup. You don't need to know the name of this, 'cause it's not the must know, but I think it's important or interesting enough to tell you. The name of this painting is The Cup of Tea. She did a bunch of them with that title because these were women that she was friends with, some French, some Americans living in Paris that she was friends with and would paint. Here's her second signature motif. I'll say the first one again. One person just joined us. One of the three signature motifs that made Mary Cassatt the first famous American woman painter was a mixture of realism with impressionism, much the same, in fact, as Degas, who was not a mentor. She already knew how to paint, but he was a friend and promoted. He promoted her painting all over France and helped make her accepted by the other impressionists. Okay, so that's one thing, the mixture of realism and impressionism. The second thing is the oblique angle. That's so obvious, it should jump out. All of her paintings have that. I mean, look at this diagonal. We're like, it's going to trip over the arm of the chair, right? The arm of the armchair and fall into her across her lap or onto the floor. I mean, it's a very unusual angle, but that's typical of both Degas and Cassatt, which is that they were definitely using the Japanese. Remember, it's a Japanese technique they're using of oblique angles. Okay, and then the third thing that marks Mary Cassatt is different than all the other painters, not just other impressionists, but all the other famous painters, is that her entire career, it's probably the most important fact about her, she focused on family or domestic life. Now you might say, oh, didn't a bunch of male painters, they'd paint their own family or a rich person's family if they were commissioned by that the husband to do a portrait of his family, but not all of their subject matter was focused on daily life or family life. So domestic or family life was the entire focus of Mary Cassatt. And some say it's because she was unable to have children. No one knows why. She never married. She was actually proposed to. I don't remember the details, but she had perhaps just say she might have been able to marry, but chose not to. She focused on her career. And second, she never had children. Oh, whether that's by choice or some other medical problem, we don't know. But we do know that she really wanted people to focus, and that's why she chose that this is her theme throughout all of her painting. Here's another cup of tea. Here's two women talking, both of them Americans living in Paris, married to Frenchmen, and they're discussing whatever, who knows, it may be gossiping or just talking about a mutual friend. They were both mothers with children. And so Mary Cassatt was invited to paint family scenes of parents with children, and of course also couples and home life. So domestic and family life, let's keep it simple, was an entire focus of career. You might think, so what, big deal, big whoop, sorry. No, that was a major statement by her saying, you know what, you male painters don't think it's important, but we would not all be here if it weren't for family life. And so she focused on things that most male painters never even thought were that important. So she's the first, that's how she became the first famous American woman painter. Here's the must know. Again, I already gave you the title. It's self-explanatory. I have a refrigerator magnet of this painting. Again, The Bath, 1891. And if you want to see the original, I've said this now several times, including my recorded lecture I put on YouTube with the first half of Impressionism. You cannot find a better collection on this side of the Atlantic Ocean, let's say in this hemisphere, as good or a collection of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism as the Art Institute of Chicago, where my parents met when they were both students. On scholarships actually, and my family used to go there all the time. And if you're in Chicago and you've got even a few hours, wherever you are, take a taxi or Uber, whatever, and go to the Art Institute. This painting is in that museum along with many other world famous paintings, because Mary Cassatt was appreciated by some people in America before most people even knew who she was. In France, she was well known. She was very popular in Europe, particularly in France, because Degas promoted her, and then her talent spoke for itself. So here we have all the elements that mark this as a Cassatt painting. First of all, the oblique angle. That's obvious. Look at this. We're practically on top of their heads here. It's a completely unusual angle, typical of Degas and Cassatt, and both of them borrowed it from Japanese art. And then we have The mixture of realism, well, the two human figures, the daughter, she's like what, 3 or so, and her mom, that's all realistic. Even the picture is, but the water in, that's how they gave baths. They had no indoor plumbing then, you know. I mean, really rich people maybe did, but most people didn't. So that's how you gave a child a bath. So the bath is this basin of water. The water is obviously impressionistic. The rug is impressionistic. The wall, all the background is impressionistic here. And then the realism is you know, typically mixed in with that in the two figures in the foreground, just like Degas did. And then we have the domestic scene. Well, that's so obvious, the mother's tender, loving care of her own daughter. And these were friends of Cassatt. And then finally, there is one more element that she used in many, but not all of her paintings. One more signature motif, and that's a mixture. I'm sorry, not a mixture, a use. I'm sorry, I'll say it again. A use of geometric patterns on the background. We'll look at this. Obviously, it's impressionistic, but it's more than that. It's a pattern of painted flowers on the dresser and the wallpaper, and then geometric patterns on the rug. So using geometric patterns in the background is also something she borrowed. Degas didn't do that. She borrowed it directly from Japanese prints. She was very influenced by Japanese art. And her work was selling in Japan before it sold much in America. But by the time she got to, you know, toward the end of the 1800s, like by the time this painting, she was known to collectors. Well, that's how her paintings end up in American museums. Again, she's the first famous American woman painter for all the reasons I just gave. Pretty important person in the history of art. All right, formal analysis. Well, it's obviously dynamic. I don't see a straight line anywhere in it. All the objects have curves and diagonals. And then we have, for space, we have overlapping, obviously foreshortening, diminishing size on the objects, you know, the rug in the background. I don't think there's scientific perspective here. It doesn't need to, because it's too close up a view. Then we have the rhythm of the arms, hands, legs, the stripes on the mother's dress, the geometric patterns. Modeling is sharp and realistic, isn't it? Very sharp and realistic on both the modeling and the cement texture on the little girl's chubby cheeks, her hair, her skin, the mom's whole body, and her dress. And I would say even on the picture, but it's soft and diffused on the water base and the water in it, especially in all the background, both the modeling and cement texture. And here there is line, sharp, thin outline on both of the human figures and the picture. Everything else, the lines are, you know, either no, there's no line in the background at all as outlined. Okay, the largest mass, the mom, then the daughter, and then it's a close call, maybe the dresser behind them or the rug. And this is balanced very cleverly. It's a masterpiece. That's why this has been reproduced as posters and, you know, all kinds of books and websites, and even, you know, refrigerator magnets, like I said, that you can buy at that museum. They own the right to it, of course. The artists of Chicago, very popular scene for, you know, people who want to, you know, say they're happy if their home life, hopefully their family life, and then put something up. That's, you know, when my daughter arrived from Russia, she wasn't even 2 years old, or barely 2. So she likes looking at that magnet every so often that we bought at that museum to remind us of that period of our family life. Okay, so the rhythm is obvious: the arms, hands, legs, heads. And then let's see, the largest masses, I've covered that. Let's see, what are we missing? Oh, balance. Well, I think it's obvious that she's across, the mom's across the middle, and at a slight angle, her daughter across her lap. They dominate the middle, and it really is just about an equal amount of empty space above and below. So it's balanced both ways. There's no distorted proportions or scale between the human figures or the background. It's all realistic. The colors, I haven't been doing colors, have I? Warm. It's pretty obvious that the whole background is warm. The wallpaper, right? The yellows and golds and things on the dresser, the reds and yellows and oranges on the rug, and the skin tones, but cool on the mother's dress, the water in the picture. Okay, I think we covered that pretty well. Oh, this is a different view, but it's not realistic. I pulled this off the internet, but you know, it's sharper, but those aren't the actual colors of what you see when you're standing in front of the painting. So I don't even know how they got that view, but someone used kind of color fill. This is how the painting would look if you were to stand in front of it. I've done it many times, the actual colors. Okay, let's now move on to probably the two artists of, well, it's hard to say with so many famous painters from today's lecture to say any one of them is the most important artist of this today's lecture. I can't really say that. You could say it's Cassatt or maybe Degas, or this guy, he's probably the most famous, Monet, the next artist we're going to spend a few minutes on. Monet, and I will show you the must know. That's not it there. Whoops, he jumped ahead too much there. I'll go ahead and just give you the must know title. Monet, of course, is spelled M-O-N-E-T. The title of this, we have two of his must knows. Rouen, R-O-U-E-N. That's a city in northern France. Rouen, I think I pronounced it correctly. Cathedral, 3 words, portal, entrance. Again, Rouen, R-O-U-E-N. Cathedral, portal, 1894. Well, who was Monet? Monet was the most famous of all the Impressionists after the movement was over. He became more famous as time went on. Nobody, I think there's no, in fact, I've seen surveys have been done this, so you don't have to write this. You could just say, of all the Impressionist painters, he's the most well-known today. You put it that way. It's in your notes. It's the first fact about it. But he wasn't always. He struggled. He even went hungry and was homeless for a while, if you can believe it. But later in his life, he became so famous that the government of France, is all part of the meaning of who he was, the government of France, the national government, not the city of Paris, the federal or whatever national government of France gave him an estate with 20 acres, a chateau, the French use that word, yes, like a small mansion, a chateau. Well, it can be large, so a house, don't ask me to spell it, it's French. You can say a large house or mansion on 20 acres that had been seized for someone for taxes. The government owned it. They gave it to him to live on tax-free, rent-free for the rest of his life because he was that important and that famous. But that's only when he was much older, the last few years of his life or decades of his life. He lived to be 90 years old.
They give tours of it.
Say, go ahead.
They give tours of it.
Yes. Did you get to go there?
Yes.
Oh,
A long time ago, but I was there.
Yes, I never got there. So you got,
I loved his kitchen.
Yeah. Oh, and the
Blue
landscaping
and
was
yellow
large
and white.
Yeah. Well, so let's say this. He got as a gift from the government of France a home, a nice, good size. You can say a large house, keep it simple, or if you want to write the word chateau, if you know how to spell it, which had been seized for taxes and was given to him because he was so important to the identity of France and their image. Because by the time they gave that to him, if you don't have to know when, it was 1890, he had already become world famous. But he didn't start out that way. He was struggling earlier on in his life. And like I said, he was homeless for us, sleeping on a friend's boat. A world famous painter. Yep, that happened. Well, look at Van Gogh. He was homeless almost his entire life. So what we have here is one of his many paintings that demonstrates how Impressionism works. And so here's the other facts about him, who he was. He was one of the first two Impressionists. The other is Manet. I know why people confuse them. It's just because their names are similar. They were both Impressionists. They started their careers at the same time, but Manet died young in his 40s. I mean, back then that was young. And he never became as famous as Monet. Even though Monet didn't start out being famous for many years, he struggled. He eventually became world famous. And that's why more people can name him. If they know only one Impressionist artist's name, it's almost always Monet, even though they should know Manet because he was one of the two first. So Monet and Manet are, some people say, the founders of Impressionism. Okay, but what does that mean when it comes to this painting? Well, here's the entrance. Portal means entry, front entrance to a cathedral. Everyone knows what a cathedral is, in a city, a French city, right? The title tells you what city. But what are we looking at exactly? We're looking at how light affects this scene. Now, remember, I said this, some of you joined late. You want to watch, if you haven't already, the lecture I recorded before I went to Southern California, right? And posted on Thursday night. So it's there on YouTube. The first half of the lecture on realism and Impressionism. I gave you the definition of both those terms. Either one or both might appear on the final. So Impressionism, I'm not going to redefine it, but I will just say the short way of defining it is that it shows an artist's interpretation or impression, there we go, impression of how light affects the scene. That's what Monet and all the Impressionists were trying to do. They were trying to convey, again, their impressions of how light affects the scene. So here's the meaning of this individual painting. By the way, I took this slide. It was at the Met in New York, this slide. You have to know that, but you see a lot of Impressionist paintings. That's the second best collection after the Chicago Art Institute, is the one at the Met in New York. So what are we looking at here in this hemisphere of Impressionists? Okay, we're looking at the front of a cathedral, one of over 20. This is a very important fact about the meaning of this. One of over 20 views of the exact same scene. That's what Monet became famous for, repeating over and over the same scene, but each time a different light. So what's his subtitle is part of the meaning of this. You should have this in your notes in case it's on the either the second midterm or the final. He subtitled those series, he called it his series paintings of the same scene, same perspective, same objects, in this case, just the front of a cathedral, right? At a different time of day, different time of year. So this one, here's the other part of me, he subtitled this painting. So it's Rouen Cathedral Portal, okay. Morning light summer effect, in French, of course. Morning light, comma, summer effect. So it's the front of the cathedral in the morning when the sun's fully risen, early morning, but how it looks in the summer. So again, I'll say his subtitle, which also explains why he did so many of the same views and how they differ, is that this one is called Morning Light Summer Effect. And he did, in other words, sometimes more than a dozen views. I mean, more than two, but usually it was somewhere around 15 or 20 views. Because obviously, if you're in the summer, you're in front of a scene, whether it's a cathedral or a farmhouse, you'll see one of those in a minute. You can paint several in the same day, right? You do a morning view, noon, afternoon, early evening, of course, the sunset. And then you come back in the spring, well, say you started in the summer, you'd come in the fall, and then the spring, the winter and the spring. You can see how you could do a series like that. So this is a part of his very famous type of painting that I don't think other Impressionists did that. None that I know of. Series paintings, where this is one of a series of, it's at least 16 paintings of the same exact scene with different lighting.
The haystacks.
Yes, that's coming. Yeah. Okay, I'll go ahead and go. See, there's one, right? Yeah, and that one is, I think, from, I forget which of the next, it doesn't matter where they are, in case you're traveling for your own interest or extra credit before the end of finals. I'll tell you where some of these are. This one's at the Met in New York. Okay, so let's now wrap up this. I already said what impression was on that lecture that's now on YouTube, so you should have already seen that, but if not, you want to watch it before the second midterm. And so this is a classic example of how light affects this scene. In this case, in the morning, in the summer light. All right, that's pretty much the whole meaning. It's balanced, yeah, completely. I think, although some people say, well, there's sky up here, but look, he gives the sky texture or implied, not realistic here. Remember, with Impressionism, you're not going to have sharp or realistic simulated textures anywhere. If the whole painting's Impressionist, as is the case with Monet, he didn't mix realism and Impressionism like Degas and Cassatt. He did strictly Impressionist paintings. Once in a while, he might mix them, but he's famous for totally, completely Impressionistic compositions. So we have soft and diffuse modeling and no simulated texture, none, implied only. Is there any line here? Nope, not as outline. Everything is patches of color, so there is no line, none. Is there some kind of techniques for space? Well, yes, because it's got obviously a foreshortening, because the cathedral he's showing us an angle, a view at an angle, so that the tower, and the edge of the building farthest to the left is obviously narrower because of foreshortening. So yes, he does use foreshortening, and there's only a little bit of overlapping. This is a flagpole, by the way. I'm surprised it doesn't have the French flag. I guess it was too early in the morning to have it out there in front of the cathedral. So there's a minimal overlapping, really only in the middle, and otherwise very little or no overlapping anywhere else. But there is foreshortening. That's it. There is no no scientific perspective, no atmospheric perspective. And I don't even know, you could say diminishing size. You could say because these windows are slightly smaller on this side. So those three techniques are used here. There's only one mass. I don't think you can break it up. The colors, every color you can see with your naked eye. And look here, this is the main stained glass window. It's got warm, cool, warm, cool. You see that alternating warm and cool patches of color. And that's in the doorway, you see the same. So it's got, you can't say it's mostly warm or cool, although when you glance or squint, if you just look at it and kind of squint, it might seem more warm because the overall effect is the summer sun in the summer kind of gives it a warm glow. So you could say it has a warm feeling, but in reality, there is a mixture of warm and cool colors in the entire painting, even in the sky, which looks at first glance just to be cool, but there's some warm hints of pink here and lighter colors. Okay, is there rhythm? Of course, with the stained glass or arched windows, right? And the doors here. It's all one mass, as I said. And let's see, there is it diagonal? Because I'd say it's mostly dynamic. Oh, well, it's both, because the walls are straight upright, as any cathedral that lasted hundreds of years would have to be stable by definition. The edges of the building are, but then, of course, we're seeing it at a diagonal. And the pointed arches, the doors, windows, all the Gothic detail, that's all dynamic. There's no distorted proportion or scale here. Okay, this is, you have to take notes on this, but since Tiny, what you mentioned, this is part of his haystack series. He did literally dozens of haystacks in different parts of France. This one, you have to write this now. We're going to get to another must-know we will cover in detail, which is the second on the syllabus of Monet's paintings. And we will end roughly on time, so we may have to finish up with Rodin, or at least one of Rodin's 2 slides at the beginning of next week on Monday. Okay, so what are we looking at? It's part of his haystack series. You don't have to write this, but just for your interest, in case you want to do extra credit or just learn more about it. He loved haystacks. French haystacks are very different than the clumsy American rectangular, solid, just functional looking American haystacks. They kind of have style, right? I have French friends who talk about that. I mean, it's unusual shape, isn't it? I don't know other countries that use that shape for their haystack. So what is this one called? Again, you don't need to write this. It's, of course, haystack, morning light, winter effect. Now watch as we move on to a painting just a few feet away in the same room. These are in the Met in New York.
Didn't the other farmers get mad at him and they would tear him down when they saw him coming?
I don't think so, unless you read something I never heard.
I read that.
Oh, maybe.
Because they were sick of him painting
permission or ask, but maybe he didn't ask for permission to
he would
step
come and
onto
drove
their
them
land.
crazy.
Yeah, if he didn't ask for permission, I could see them thinking of, but I never heard that, but I wouldn't be surprised. Anyway, this is the same view, just much closer. And it's probably a different haystack because it didn't probably sit there for months, but it could have. In any case, he's gotten much closer to this haystack on the same field. How do we know? Because those are the same mountains. Look at them that you'll see right here. And the same farmhouses that are barely visible in the winter view. And here the sun is hitting them, so they're reflecting off of the white stucco walls. So this is called haystack evening light autumn effect, because this obviously, look at the colors, it's autumn. It's this time of year, fall. Okay, now we get to the next must know. This is very high possibility of being on either the second midterm or the
This is
final.
one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's just fabulous. Yeah,
I painted this.
Oh,
I copied it. Yeah, I sure did.
No, that's a skill I've never learned, but my mother did that too, and when she was a student at the Art Institute. Okay, here we go. Here's the title. Monet, of course, is M-O-N-E-T, and then it's Japanese Footbridge and Water Garden. Long title, I'll repeat that, but pretty much self-explanatory. I think the spelling, footbridge is one word, just like it sounds. Oh, that tragedy in India with that footbridge, that was so sad. And the one in Korea. I've been to Seoul. Gosh, that was tragic. Two major tragedies on the opposite sides of the world at the same time. Anyway, this now, I'll say it slowly, the full title, that you definitely want to take good notes on this one. I'm not cutting it from the study list. In other words, is Japanese Footbridge, second word, one word, Footbridge and Water Garden, 1899. Now, this is at the Musée d'Orsay, but there's a similar one at the Met. But this is the version, at least from the website at the museum in Paris. We talked about that. Well, I did on my recorded lecture that's now posted on YouTube, the first half of the Impressionism lecture from Monday. So what are we looking at? This is his estate. This is a garden on his estate. That is the estate I'll spell it for you, Giverny, and that he was given. Remember, I said this with the last slide. It's part of the meaning of who he was. If either of the two Monet slides appear on the test, you'd want to say this. He was one of the very few artists ever given an entire estate to live on, rent and tax-free, because he was such a famous and popular painter. Late in his life, though. Latest grade, and it was called Giverny. I'll spell it. You don't have to worry about the spelling. Is any word not on syllabus, but you should get it right in your notes. Of course, capital Giverny. It's in. Well, you tell us, Tanya. What part of France would you say that's in? Northern France, Central France, North of Paris, South of
I
Paris?
think it's south of. I have to be looking
Yeah,
at that, but I think it's south.
Yeah,
It's
Just
very
say
luscious.
Yeah, say it's in rural France.
Yeah, it's a rule because of the trees and the
Just say
all the
rural, yeah.
landscaping, but
In the
it's
note.
very luscious.
Yeah, it's
I
20
remember
acres.
it being very luscious.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. Yeah,
And sort of fantasy-like.
yeah. Well, he landscape. That
Yeah.
point is a good one,
Yeah.
because if you want to add the next fact about the meaning of this slide, is this an illustration of an area of his own gardens that he hired the
Mhm.
gardeners. He didn't do it all by himself. He was getting
Told
older,
him what to do.
but he designed the gardens there. And that's what you see if you go now. You should add that, as we just heard from Tanya, that is now open to the public as a museum. It's a very popular tourist site.
Mhm.
I think over 1 million people a year come.
Mhm.
Anyway, at least a lot of European tourists and some Americans.
Because people were saying, I want to stay here.
Yeah,
I
can
want to live
imagine.
here.
I can imagine. Yeah. Well, so he designed this bridge. It is a traditional Japanese style footbridge. And if you don't know that style of architecture, go to the Japanese tea garden. I said this about 3 lectures ago. That's an extra credit option. Take 4 photos and turn them into PDF, and you get 10 points. It's in the Golden Gate Park next to the De Young Museum, and it just reopened the pagoda there. But they have these footbridges all over. That's left from the 1894 Midwinter Fair, which was a small echo of the big Chicago exposition the year before. The first big World's Fair in America was in Chicago in 1893. A year later, we had a small one in San Francisco, and that whole Japanese tea garden is the same as it was right around the time this painting was done. But
That's
of course,
beautiful.
this influence, Japanese style landscaping, gardening, and the Japanese printmaking influence in painting, we've covered that now on this lecture and others, was very strong by this time. By the time this was painted, lots of artists in the Western world, North America and Europe, were influenced and openly inspired by Japanese traditional architecture and landscaping and printmaking. Very strong influence. And now we have anime and all the other things that Japanese influence has. Okay, so the Japanese style footbridges, he designed it, but he was inspired by Japanese traditional garden landscaping. But here's your water garden. It's really water lily, right? And it's brilliantly done, because what you have here is under the bridge, he's creating the illusion of realistic simulated texture. But look carefully. Let's do the formal elements now. I pretty much described the whole meaning. You already know he's one of the 2 founders of Impressionism. So there's plenty on the meaning you should have from the last note and then where this is. Let's do the formal analysis, and we'll probably wrap it up right about on time, because there's a lot to say. Let's start with simulated texture. No, there's none. It's fully an Impressionist painting, but it is implied very carefully. And that's especially true of the smooth surface of what the water would look like, where the sun doesn't hit and make the water lilies grow. You see, they go here and here on either side of where the shadow of the bridge would be. So that's how an actual real water garden would look. But it is, look carefully, that's all soft and diffused. There is no realistic simulated textures. They're only implied. The same thing for the modeling, especially on the bridge. It should be obvious. That's not sharp and realistic, but it is modeling, in this case, soft diffuse modeling. On the water lilies, the water garden itself, water lily garden, on the bridge and on the trees. Now, this one has atmospheric perspective because of the blue hazy look back here, right? And this has the scientific perspective. There's no question everything fades in an accurate way to a vanishing point beyond the trees. So it has a vanishing point, therefore it has scientific perspective, atmospheric perspective in the background. Obviously, there's foreshortening on the water garden, or the pond, you could say pond, and overlapping, and diminishing size on the trees. So it's got all the main techniques for space. Impressionists usually didn't use all of those, but Monet did like occasionally to make realistic depth. in his paintings, which he did here. The largest mass, you decide, is it the footbridge? But if you think of the water lilies or the pond as one mass, I'd say that's the largest, then the footbridge, and then the willow tree. I would say, I assume that's a willow tree. It looks like a willow. And of course, the rhythm is obvious with the railings on the bridge, each individual, right, of these lilies is a repeated shape, and the hanging branches of the trees, particularly the willow tree. Now, the color's more a mixture of cool and warm. It depends on how you see the green in the trees. There's more yellows, like the sun's hitting it in the late afternoon, maybe. And the bridge, you notice that? So that would be warm, though the bridge itself is clearly mostly cool, as are most of the lily pads, except for the flowers that do grow on top of course, water lilies. So those are pink. It's a mixture of warm and cool, every way you look. There's no more dominant or not. It is very carefully balanced. Obviously, even though some people think, well, this tree is more well lit, so it makes it feel unbalanced toward the left. I wouldn't say that, because there's an equal number of trees, and the bridge is directly across the middle, and the pond is centered. It's balanced, top to bottom and left to right. There's no distortion of proportion here, right? Of any unnatural or abnormal or unrealistic scale or proportions. All the objects are realistically scaled and proportioned. And then we have, let's see, rhythm, of course, with the railings of the bridge, the water lilies, the trees. And let's see, am I missing anything? I think we covered everything. There's no line. No line here. Remember that, truly impressionist painting. Okay, we're right about where we should be in terms of ending time. So we are going to cover Rodin at the beginning of next week, and he's an artist I'm not cutting from the study list, so you want to be here on Monday for that. And don't forget to look in your inbox. Okay, here we go. Your email from me will on Thursday by 6, it'll probably be sooner, but no later than 6 p.m. tomorrow. We'll have that short list of 4 slides, from which one of which will be the essay format test. Again, I'll repeat the instructions in the email, but you'll have 2 PDFs. You do need to, of course, download those. One will be the test itself, the test sheet, and you may need to use some of your own unlined paper if you're writing it by hand, or you could do it all typed. And then the cover sheet, which of course is how we grade it. So there'll be 2 forms sent to you, which you should combine and send in as a PDF by midnight on the 9th. So you've got a whole week from today. And then Monday, we will then continue. We'll start with the post-impressionist. And some of you already know this. Van Gogh was not an impressionist. We're going to cover him in detail. And we'll probably get to him on Monday. You want to be here for that lecture. And then the test is the entire class on the 9th. Okay, we've covered pretty much everything, and this is, of course, going to be posted, all of this, the instructions, if you missed the first few minutes for how the test is going to be given the second midterm a week from today. And also, obviously, if you didn't already see it, the first half of Impressionism with the definitions of Impressionism and Realism is already posted on YouTube. This will be posted by Thursday night, or let's say Friday. Yes, Tanya?
It says right here that his farm is temporarily closed. I don't know why.
Because of probably the
Could be the pandemic.
Yeah, I was guessing. Yeah, hopefully it's been reopened or will soon. Well, anyway, I think we've covered almost everything that we planned to cover. But this is a chance to ask questions if there's anything that is.
So
yes.
So you're saying that tomorrow you're going to give the slides?
Yes. There'll be 4, and you just want to collect your notes from those 4, maybe read back over those notes. But the main thing is you should have them next to you for all 4 of that very short list. One of those will be the one you'll say, okay, I know, I see we're going to have to write about that work. So let me just pull those notes out, and you can ignore the other 3.
Okay.
It's a standard format. I think some of you know this in history and art history. I mean, and psychology and my daughter's done it that way. And many of her, she's a student here at the JC online. And a lot of professors give you several choices of what you'll have to write about. So you need to get your research or your notes ready. You already have the notes. You should, from all the slides, the 4 short list of slides. One of those will be the one you write about. It's pretty straightforward. I think it's simple.
No, I've got it. I've done it before. I just wanted to make sure, be clear on it.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. Okay, so let's see. Any other questions? Because I think
Emily,
it's-
call me. This is Tanya.
Oh, okay. All right. Anybody else have any really urgent questions? Of course, you can always email me, but I think I've covered. I hope nobody's going to say, so how's the test going to be given when I've already covered it? And it'll be on the recording of this, which will be posted by Friday. Don't forget, in case you joined us late, but it'll also be in the email I'll send you by tomorrow evening, the summary of how the test is being given. It's very simple, but I will say this, because I don't know if I'll remember to say this, probably will in the email instructions. Word to the wise, have at least 2 black ink pens because one might run out of ink or get leaky, and at least 2 extra sheets of paper if you're going to that's if you choose to write your answers for the essay format second midterm in, remember, print neatly, don't use longhand. If you choose to write them out, then you'll need to have at least 1, maybe 2 black ink pens and a couple sheets of extra sheets of paper. Otherwise you can just type them in as a document. And then remember, you'll have till midnight to send them in to me on the day of the test, which is 1 week from today, Wednesday, November 9th. But I look forward to seeing you all, and hopefully for the whole time on Monday, because we have to do a little catch up with Rodin, and then we're going to launch right into post-impressionism and Van Gogh. I think we'll get that far. We definitely should by the end of section Monday. He's someone who could easily appear on the final. All right.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Next Monday, I think I am in San Francisco. We are going to go and see in my other history class.
Oh, okay.
The
One of the 2 museums.
what's
Pharaohs?
his name? No, the Diego Rivera.
Oh, I'd look forward to that. There's an extra credit option, just
Yeah, we're
show
going to
me
be in
proof.
San
and you get 10
Francisco
bucks.
next Monday.
Maybe you can tell us, or at least let me know if you want to by email, what you like. I'm looking forward to seeing it as a birthday present from a friend of mine. She said, yeah, let's go do that after classes are over. But it's there till January, and you can still do that. It's at the MoMA, right? Museum of Modern Art.
Yes, we're going as a field trip.
So you'll see obviously you will see the lecture, on
Yes.
YouTube, which will be
Yes.
posted next week. So if you miss it, it's not going to be a problem for you to have those
Okay.
notes when the
Okay.
actual final exams, you'll have that. Because you might be tested on the Monday slides after.
Okay, because I also have a meeting that same day at the Legion of Honor. I also have a meeting
Sounds like a
there.
busy day. Okay, so I think I've answered most everyone's question for now, and I will send you that, set of 2 PDFs that you'll need to combine into one file, and the instructions yet again, and a short list of 4 slides that you should have the notes from for the midterm, second midterm, which appears a week from today. But don't forget, Monday, we're going to cover Impressionism, and those could be on the final, any of those slides. Okay, I'll see you guys. All right. On
Thank
Monday.
you.
See you. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.